Hi everyone, my name is Catherine and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, on this channel you're going to find videos about visual impairments and blindness, because that's where my experience is, and also about hobbies and fun things that I enjoy doing as a woman with a visual impairment. You may have noticed, if you've been around for a little while, that I'm in a different space today than normal. I usually like to sit in the front room in my house. I think it's really cozy and, just a nice place to sit and chat. But for today's video, I needed props. And in my online classroom, there are props. But today, I want to talk about depth perception and the fact that I don't have any. Now, this is a question that I get a lot from sighted friends when they find out that I don't have depth perception. And that is, but how do you know that things are three-dimensional then? How do you handle not having depth perception? How do you know there's a curb or a step? And so I thought I would answer that question today because it's one that I get all the time, and it's one that I've spent a lot of time really thinking about and really analyzing. And the more I've gotten into learning how to draw and learning how to paint with watercolors, the more I've started to really understand and be able to verbalize how I interpret depth. Because I don't see depth, I don't perceive depth, I interpret it. And so today's video is dedicated to just exploring that a little bit. Let's unpack what that means and go from there. So for normal eyesight, for eyes that function properly, you have cones in the very middle of your eyes, and they are what allow you to perceive color, and they are what allow you to perceive that sharp, fine, focused detail. They require a lot of light coming in, which is why when it's nighttime, you don't see colors as well, if you see them at all. And also why at nighttime things appear blurrier. And it's because of the part of your eye that you're using at night. At night, you're using what are called the rods, and they are all around the cones. Like they're what surround the cones. And rods are what give you peripheral vision. They're what allow you to see at night in the dark. And they are, because they give you peripheral vision, they're also what allow you to have depth perception. So let's think how I'm going to explain this here. I have cones, and my cones work very well. Especially for my particular eye condition. I have a lot of eyesight for the eye condition that I have. I have a whole lot of eyesight. My cones work great. Now, I have rods. The structure is there, but my rods don't work. And in fact, if, and I wish I still had this picture because I would love to show it, but if you were to look at an actual picture of the inside of my eye, you could see that there are all these little teeny tiny white dots all over the inside of my eye. And those are the rods that don't function. A normal healthy eye does not look like that. A normal healthy eye does not have all the little teeny tiny white dots. And it's because those rods just don't function that my rods happen to look that way. And so because my rods don't work, I don't have any peripheral vision. I basically, for eyesight, all I have is what my cones can see. And so because my cones work really, really well, my central vision, that little tiny 5-degree field, is very sharp and very good. My eyesight, when corrected, is somewhere around 20/70. What a normal person with healthy eyes could see at 70 feet away, I can see at 20 feet away. But for my eye condition, that is fantastic. That's amazing. So I only have that 5-degree field. My only eyesight is where my cones are. So I don't have any depth perception because I don't have the peripheral vision to give me any kind of context in terms of that comparison that you need to do in order to make sense of depth. And I have no idea what that would even look like. I have absolutely no concept of that. So a lot of what I'm talking about has been sort of brought into sharper focus by conversations I've had with friends, by conversations I've had with my mother, and I'm trying very hard to make this make sense. So I don't have rods that function. I have rods, they just don't work. I have cones that function, so I can see in sharp detail, I can read normal sized print, I can read very small print, I can use a computer without a screen reader, I can use a phone and a tablet without needing a screen reader. But I don't have depth perception. And so when I look at anything, it looks to me the way I believe it looks to you when you're looking at a photograph, or when you are looking at, let's say, a movie on a screen, or when you're looking at a drawing. Even a very good drawing that has really excellent shading and, you know, is very good, still looks like a drawing to you. And that's how the entire world looks to me. Even a photograph that is very well composed would still look, it would still have the illusion, it would still have the look of everything being on the same level. And that's how the entire world looks to me. I do not see depth. So what does that mean exactly? How do I get around? How do I deal with not seeing depth? And there are some tricks that I have figured out on my own and that I've been taught by my orientation and mobility teacher, and that I've just kind of had to adapt and figure out. Some things I've only recently started thinking about as I've gotten more interested and practiced more with drawing and painting, and some things that are just how I do things because I was born with my eyes this way, and so it's just how I do things. So one way that I interpret depth is based on relative size. So I'm going to take Dino and, oh, let's see. Let's grab an elephant. Okay, so we're looking at relative size here, right? So we have Dino, who's quite large, and relatively speaking, the stuffed elephant that is smaller than Dino. So if I hold them out, and this is a little bit tricky because my field of vision is so small that at this distance, I actually can't see both of these items at the same time. But let's pretend, if I hold them out, let's pretend that I could see them both at the same time. Now, because I am physically holding them, I know that they're on the same level, right? I know that Dino and the elephant are on the same level. One is not farther away than the other. However, because Dino is bigger, to me, Dino appears closer. Because the elephant is smaller, to me, the elephant appears farther away. Because part of what I do to interpret depth is I use relative size. So now I am going to move Dino farther away. But now Dino appears to be the same size as the elephant. So even though I know, because I'm holding him farther away, I know that Dino is farther away, dino and the elephant appear to be in the same line because they appear to be the same size, because I use relative size to help me interpret depth. So let's take this a little bit further. Let's go back to the elephant. And unfortunately, I only have one elephant, but this is a really good example because elephants are generally so large. I have an elephant here. Now, if I also had a baby elephant, let's say I'm looking at a picture or I'm looking at a TV screen and there are elephants on the screen. Now, if I am looking at two elephants, and let's say one is a baby and one is an adult, but they're far enough away that I can't see that the baby elephant is actually a baby. Let's just say it just looks small to me. I can't actually see that it's a real true baby. I am going to assume that the smaller of the two elephants is farther away even than the bigger of the two elephants, because I'm relying on relative size to tell me depth. It's kind of like if you've ever seen the movie Elf, if you've ever seen how they made Elf, when they are trying to show that Will Ferrell is, you know, a normal human size, and that all of the other people in the North Pole, aside from Santa, but all the other people in the North Pole are elves and so therefore are much smaller than he is. They use what's called forced perspective. And in that case, it was meant to trick everyone, and I'm pretty sure it worked. I assume it worked from the way everyone talks about the film. I assume it worked. What they're doing is they're putting Will Ferrell a lot closer to the camera, and they're putting everybody else in that scene way far away from the camera. But because of camera angles, you can't see that. You just see that Will Ferrell looks super tall, and all of the other characters in the scene look elf size. Well, if you imagine that, but reverse it, and that is how I interpret depth. So I'm not using forced perspective to create an illusion of someone being taller, but I'm using what I am seeing as relative size to decide if something is closer or farther away. The other way that I interpret depth is based on colors, and very specifically value. So if you have ever done much in the way of drawing, painting, any kind of like visual art in that way, values are how light or dark a color is. So I can tell that something has depth based on the values that I see in it, because shadows. And shadows are a great way to indicate depth, because the way light falls on something will create patterns and shadows, and so you'll have like lighter values on top and darker values underneath, and that's how I can tell that there's depth. Because again, I can't actually see that there's depth. I'm using all kinds of other clues to help tell me that there's depth. So let's go back to our pal Dino. Right. So obviously I'm holding him, so I know that he's three-dimensional, but let's pretend I'm not. I'm going to look at Dino. And the way I'm going to know that he is in fact three-dimensional is because I can see that there's a brighter yellow here on his nose, and I know he's the same color yellow all around. So there's brighter yellow here on his nose where the light is hitting his nose first because it pokes out. And then there is darker yellow here on the side of his head, as the light falls away from it. So that's how I can tell that he is three-dimensional, because the yellow goes from being very bright and light up here on his nose to being still bright but darker here on the side of his head. And so that's how I know that he's three-dimensional. It's not because I actually can see the depth, and I don't even know how to explain how you all see depth. So it's not that I can see that he's three-dimensional really quickly. It's that I can interpret that he is three-dimensional because of the shading that I can see on him. Now the trick here is, if I were to draw Dino, or if someone were to draw Dino and to make him, you know, actually draw this stuffed animal and actually want to make it look three-dimensional, or at least look, you know, like it's a really good drawing with, you know, the really good shading and everything, that would also look the same to me as this actual stuffed animal does in person. So you can draw and you can, you know, make a painting and all with the nose, with the lighter color, the lighter values up here, then you get the darker values on this side, on the, you know, towards the back where the light's not hitting as much. And to me, that actually appears very three-dimensional. That actually might appear to have more depth than the actual stuffed animal has to me. Because often when people paint and when they draw and when they add color to things, they add more contrast than what is actually there in real life. So to take another example, let's use flowers. Time of year, flowers are coming out. So I'm going to take one of these flowers. And these are just cheap flowers from Walmart that I got to use as classroom props. But you can see that there's depth in this flower, right? You can see the shadows that are being created by the light hitting it, and you can see that there's depth here. You can see the shading that the light creates on this flower. Here's the thing. I can see it a little bit here because the light is very specific and directed. You know, these are bright LED lights. They are pointed straight at me. Which means they're pointed straight at these flowers. And because this is cloth, it folds differently than actual flowers do. So I can see the dimension and the shadows and changes in color a little bit more on something like this. But when I go outside and I look at actual flowers, they don't look like this. In fact, very often flowers look perhaps more two-dimensional to me than anything else. I can look at a daisy and I can see the bright yellow stamen and I can see the bright white petals, but I don't see the shadows. I don't see the subtle changes in shadows that make a flower look convex or concave. I don't see the subtle changes in the petals that let you know that there's a curve there. All I'm seeing is the difference in color, and it looks really very flat to me. I don't see the highlights and lowlights on the leaves on a peony bush or a rose bush that I see when I see other people painting those things. And again, I think that's partly because in an effort to make it look like it has, like the painting has depth and dimension, those shadows, those shades, and those highlights are being slightly overemphasized, because I don't see those things when I actually look in real life, in actual daylight outside at these flowers. I think one of the reasons I really love peonies in turn, you know, as a flower, is because they're so fluffy and so bushy and there are so many petals, and I almost can't not see some of the depth to them, because there's just so much to see there. But, you know, in general, I don't see the shades and the shadows and the complexities of the way the light plays on a Black-Eyed Susan or on a lily. Lilies are beautiful flowers, but I like them more because of the way they smell than because of the way they look. In fact, a lot of lilies I honestly think look quite funny because I'm not seeing the individual petals coming together to make a flower. I'm just seeing, brown. Looks like someone, you know, took a paintbrush and just went, brown. Bumped it bumped it onto nature and said, there you go, there's a flower. And so to me, it looks very funny. And again, I like their colors and I like the way they smell, but lilies in general, I find very awkward because I just don't see that level of detail that allows me to see the depth because their colors all kind of run into each other. And so I'm not seeing this very subtle differences in shades and tones. And that's why I really enjoy painting, because it allows me to express those shades and tones. And I enjoy looking at other people's work because I can actually see the shades and I can see the depth in a much, almost to me, more real way than I can in real life. Another way I interpret depth is also by, like when I'm looking for stairs. And this is less of a problem with a white cane or with a guide dog. I think I mentioned in my last video, I didn't learn to use a cane until I was in 7th grade. So before that point, I had to learn how to find steps on my own. And when you don't have depth perception, that's very tricky. So one of the things that my orientation and mobility teacher taught me to do was to, when I came to an area that might have steps or that where I saw railings, well, if there are railings, there are steps, first of all. Second of all, you can look down and follow the lines across to the wall. And when you see the wall, if you see that sort of zigzagged, there we go, zigzag like stair step pattern against the wall, then that means there are steps there. So that's another way that I will use patterns to find and interpret depth, whether that means I'm looking for stairs, or I could be looking for railings, or I might even be looking for specific patterns to tell me where doors are or where openings are in buildings. And all of that helps me to interpret depth, even though I don't see it. So I hope this was a really interesting video for you. I hope this was useful. If it was, please feel free to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. There are some interesting videos up already, and there are plenty more to come. So it would mean a lot to me if you subscribed and hit the bell if you would like notifications of whenever I post new videos. I hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments what you think about this. Does it make sense? Do you have questions? I'm very curious to understand more about how you interpret depth, how you see it, how you interpret it, and you know, let me know. I'm curious because I don't really understand. I can't visualize it, I can't conceptualize it. And so I would be very interested to know how you deal with depth. Whether you can see it or not, I'd be very interested in how you handle that. I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. And until next time, see ya!